I was just actually going to ask the audience as well. I think accessibility of information and these sort of forums are really important. So one question I have for people here is how many have actually been to the Garnaut town halls that happened after the release of his draft paper? So that's a good sign that it was full. Has anyone been to them? No, no one else. It's an interesting outcome.
These ones are much better. I think that's
Yes, that's right. Well, these are much more intimate, in fact. I happened to be in Adelaide the day that Ross was there. He did the series of back-to-back from Perth, I think, back to Brisbane. And I went because I wanted to see what one of them was like, and I was very interested in who turned up. We're just commenting before that the Adelaide Town Hall is beautiful. It was absolutely packed, and people were there from all sorts of different walks of life. It was a good time of day. People did just come from the office. A lot of people came from their own home. There was a lot of private citizens there, and the sort of questions reflected what people are wanting to know. And I think it's important that what we do in Australia now going forward, because I think there is a lot of disagreement. There's a lot of people who want more information. There's a thirst for it, but it's not easily accessible. So I applaud the fact that the Whitlam Institute has put these events on. And in fact, I think that's a message for government. And I think they heard it quite clearly through those series of town halls. But again, they only happened in the capitals. And so what we need to do is make sure that it's more like a travelling roadshow and gets out into the community. We've even gone as far as Parramatta today. So that's quite a move forward. So one of the things is then how do you balance the corporate responsibilities that CEOs have to their shareholders and to the broader stakeholders? I mean, part of it is that they actually survive and that they are sustainable in the true sense of that word. So it's really important that the work is carried out by the companies. I'm still dealing with companies who don't know what their greenhouse emissions are. We're certainly not talking about ones that have significant energy inputs. They do know, and they know it very well. But a lot of them don't have immediate solutions, and they're really putting off some of these decisions because, as strange as it might seem, that 2010 feels like a long way off. Maybe when we finally get to January 2009, it won't feel so far away. But one of the things is that I find I work with a lot of companies who are extremely busy in the sense of there's a lot of other action going on, whether it be the credit crunch in a negative sense, or in fact coming from Queensland, there's a lot of opportunities. Companies are growing very quickly in the resources boom. You probably see it in Queensland and Western Australia quite a lot. These companies are so busy at doing what they need to do that anything that isn't immediate isn't on the radar. Again, not a bad job for consultants because they actually just don't have the people. But in all seriousness, they actually don't have skilled people. Australia is very light on at the moment in terms of the appropriate skills that we need, whether it's to support the resources boom. We don't even have enough accommodation for people in most of the mining towns anymore. But also, in fact, in the area I work in, I can see a lot of bottlenecks coming forward. And so that's one of the things in terms of, again, linking back to the educational facilities, that this is not going to be a short-term issue. This is somewhere where we need a lot of support over a period of time. So all of the new courses are going to be required to help people understand it. It's truly multidisciplinary. So, I mean, for example, in the way I work with engineers, I work with lawyers, I work with corporate people, with a lot of commercial background. A lot of the banks have very wide resourcing at the moment in terms of the sort of skill sets we're looking for. It's not going to be one person that has these sort of solutions, but we really do need a lot more focus in terms of the training going forward. And business is calling out for that at the moment. Then if you look at government, so what can we actually ask our governments to do here in Australia? One of the things that's obviously going to be very important is looking at a very cohesive strategy. Our governments are not good at doing this. They're not good at looking at short, medium and long-term strategy when we have a 3-year election cycle. It's actually almost impossible to do. But that's what's required. This is something, as I said, it's crossed all of the disciplines. It has to be whole of government and it has to be for the long term, and it has to be bipartisan, and that's actually quite difficult to achieve. But I think it's something that we have to feed back to particularly to the federal government, to the Australian government, that that's what we require. So we do need a strategy. We need to understand what are we going to do. For example, what do we do in the interim when we don't have a global agreement for post-2012? How is Australia going to respond to that? And they're the issues that are being tackled at the moment. But what if we don't have an international agreement for 10 years? How does Australia actually respond to that? And how do we actually embed in those decisions the right sort of outcomes for Australia, given all the other issues that we're going to face over that time? So I think if you were asking the government for key decisions going forward, my priority, in fact, would be the international negotiations and some clever way of being able to support that through our own actions at home. I don't mean just in terms of superficial, I mean real action, but we need to actually find some leverage to get other countries to come on board, because ultimately we are one of the most exposed developed countries in the world. We also need to make sure that we have this long-term strategy. We need to work out what we do, as I said, in the short, medium and long term, and we're not very good at that. We're not very good at it because of the political cycle and also because it's not bipartisan supported at the moment. I think we do need the carbon signal. I've spent 11 years of my life looking at how we're going to introduce a carbon signal in Australia to bring about the investment in low emission technologies. I think it's absolutely essential, but we do need some complementary measures as well. And I think we need a very large investment in clean technologies. I quite like Ross Garnaut's $3 billion a year. That was sort of a job that I'd like to have, to hand out $3 billion a year. Absolutely no mention of any money at all in the Green Paper only 2 weeks later, so it's terribly disappointing. And $3 billion, imagine what you could do with that. I'm talking to a university here, so I know what that's like, but $3 billion would go a long way every year, and that was what Ross's analysis was of our contribution as a country internationally. It's absolutely essential that we have that. So thank you. Hopefully some ideas to suggest some comments for the questions. Thank you.